What is happening, YouTube? Welcome back, guys, for another episode on Mob Talk UK. Today we're going to be talking about a story that takes us to the very heart of Manchester, and that is Salford. And this story is about the war that broke out between the Quality Street Gang and Paul Massey back in 1981. So let's delve right into it, guys. It was billed as Wedding of the Century, and to mark the union of Prince Charles and Diana Spencer, the UK had been given a national holiday. But in a Salford club that very same day, the mood wasn't quite so, how can we put it? It wasn't quite so jubilant, let's say. As 600,000 people lined the route of the wedding procession in London and 10 million more people took part in street parties across the country, an insane Wild West style brawl was about to kick off in Salford. Pint pots flew and punches were thrown as Manchester's old and new criminal establishments clashed in a ferocious battle. It was the start of a feud that would end up with several of the main players behind bars and at least one man fighting for his life in hospital. And it would also mark the start of a changing of the guard that would have long-term repercussions in gangland Manchester. Sat around a table in the club that night on Wednesday, July the 29th, 1981, were soon-to-be Salford Mr. Big, Paul Massey, his close pal and former boxer-turned-doorman Paul Doyle, also known as One Punch Doyle, and with him was also a bunch of the Salford lads. Young, ambitious and ruthless, Paul Massey and Paul Doyle were then up-and-coming criminals. Having both met in prison, on their release they began carving out a name for themselves in Salford's murky underworld. But that didn't sit very well with some of Manchester's more established villains of the day. During the 1960s, 70s and early 80s, the legendary Quality Street Gang were considered by some to be behind much of the major crime in Manchester. It was a claim that alleged gang members themselves, including well-respected but notorious men like Jimmy Swords and Jimmy the Weed, deny, insisting instead that they were just a loose collection of businessmen, acquaintances and drinking pals. Whatever the truth of the matter, it was alleged that the Quality Street Gang had their fingers in a lot of pies throughout Manchester back in the day. An explosive court case in the 80s heard evidence from secret police folders that the Quality Street Gang were in fact very much professional criminals and even suspected of being gun runners for the IRA. A large part of their interests involved controlling the doors at many of the city's pubs, clubs and casinos throughout Manchester. Now these were places that were regularly frequented by Paul Massey and Doyle and their associates. But, armed with plenty of cash from the ill-gotten gains, the cocky young lads weren't always the best-behaved punters when they were in these establishments that were manned by the Quality Street Gang. Club owners started to ask the Quality Street Gang to do something about the Salford lads running riot in their establishments every weekend. It was an hassle the Quality Street Gang didn't need. It was, as Paul Doyle would later say, simply a matter of time before things kicked off. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. As Paul Massey and Paul Doyle sat around on the night of Charles and Diana's wedding, 6 or 7 tough-looking blokes walked into the club and headed straight for the bar. Doyle later said, "I knew the possibility of these lads just being out celebrating the wedding was pretty slim. After a couple of minutes, one of them approached us. The guy barely said a word before putting a pint glass over one of my mates' heads. It was a big mistake. Without saying anything more than a glance at each other, we all jumped up in unison and we met them halfway with a full Salford onslaught. In the crazy brawl that followed, the man who launched the original attack was badly injured. As police rushed to the scene, Paul Doyle managed to escape, but Paul Massey and 2 others that night were arrested, charged with GBH and remanded in Strangeways prison. But the violence did not end there. After this brawl in the Salford club, what happened was a series of tit-for-tat reprisals followed in the coming weeks. The very next weekend, Paul Doyle says that he was shot in the leg as he walked into town with his girlfriend. Around the same time, another one of the Salford lads present at the brawl was hiding out in the women's toilets of a nearby pub, having been chased down by members of the Quality Street Gang. Then, Doyle said that a Ford Transit van was accidentally driven into the front door of one of the Quality Street Gang's illegal drinking and gambling dens just off Deansgate. Another place frequented by members of the Quality Street Gang had its doors blown off with a shotgun. The war wasn't doing anyone any favours. Through a mutual acquaintance who worked on the doors in Salford, Swords got a message to Doyle that a sit-down was muchly needed. It took place in the unlikely surroundings of the cafe on the top floor of the old Kendall's department store on Deansgate. Over a cup of tea, Swords offered Doyle a deal. Stop the attacks against the Quality Street Gang, and in return, it offered Doyle and his mates the VIP treatment anywhere he went at his network of clubs and bars and throw the odd bit of work his way. Paul Doyle later said, "I was looking at the clothes that day that Jimmy was wearing, and they just oozed class. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and make some serious coin. I was about to take the first backward step in life, reach my first compromise, but far from it being the coward's way out, it felt like the smart thing to do at the time. I reached for his hand and shook it, this time with a big smile on my face." Over the next decade or so, as the reach and influence of the Quality Street Gang slowly declined as its members aged and they moved on, Paul Massey rose up the ranks to take their place. In a very fragmented underworld, he was joined by the likes of the Cheetah Mill Gang and Moss Size, Doddington and Gooch crews, as the rival mobs all jostled for position in Manchester's gangland. But as Paul Massey rose the ranks, his good friend at the time, Paul Doyle, wouldn't be at his side. I'm not sure what happened. I've heard different stories, but at some point along the way, the two of them fell out, resulting in the notorious Manchester Door Wars, which is something I am going to delve into more, guys, and there will be a later episode on the Manchester Door Wars. Having gone his own way, Paul Doyle would later become a major drug dealer, eventually being handed a 16-year prison sentence in 2015 for plotting to flood the northwest with vast quantities of heroin, cocaine, cannabis and amphetamines worth over £300 million. In July that same year, 2015, Paul Massey's reign came to an end. Massey was shot dead by a hired hitman outside his own home in Clifton, having lost his decades-long grip on organised crime in Salford. So there we have it, guys. That is the story of the war that broke out between the Quality Street Gang and Paul Massey back in 1981. I hope you all enjoyed this episode on Mob Talk UK. Drop us a comment, drop us a like. If you haven't subscribed already, it would be so much appreciated if you did subscribe to the channel. And I'll be seeing you very soon for another episode on Mob Talk UK. As always, guys, take care. Be well. God bless. I'll see you soon.